I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Alexander stood in front of me, his eyes dark, unreadable, and serious. The penthouse was silent except for the soft hum of the city below. He held a paper in his hand, the edges crisp, almost threatening. My heart skipped a beat when he stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "I just want a baby." "With you," he whispered. The words hit me like a lightning strike. I felt my knees weaken and my chest tighten. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't one of our silly childhood dares. This was real, and it changed everything. I stared at him, my mind blank. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. The rain-streaked glass behind me blurred the city lights into colors I couldn't name. Everything felt surreal, unreal, like I had been thrown into someone else's nightmare. He was calm, too calm. Ahor and I was shaking, feeling a mix of fear, confusion, and something I didn't want to admit. The contract in his hand gleamed in the dim light. It was a promise, a threat, a temptation all at once. I wanted to run, I wanted to scream, I wanted to disappear. But I stayed, because somehow I knew this was the moment nothing would ever be the same again. Welcome back to Storyverse Vault, my beautiful, amazing Story Vault family. You all have been so supportive, and I promise to always try my best to give you the best stories as I learn and improve every day. If this is your first time coming across my video, do comment below where you are watching from and hit subscribe to officially join the Story Vault family. Now let's get into today's story. Alexander turned away for a moment, his jaw tight. I followed him with my eyes, confused by my own curiosity. We had been best friends since we were kids. We shared secrets, dreams, heartbreaks. But this was different. The Alexander I knew, the one who laughed easily and teased me relentlessly, seemed gone. In his place stood someone sharp, calculated, almost cold. I remembered the nights he used to stay over when I had nightmares. He had always been my protector, but now it felt like he was asking me to give something I couldn't fully understand. Something that might change our lives forever. I don't know if I can," I said, my voice trembling. He didn't look at me. He only whispered, "Just think about it." And then he left the room, leaving the paper on the marble counter, heavy and demanding. I sank onto the couch, my fingers tracing the edges of the paper. Everything about it screamed power, control, expectation. I remembered all the moments we shared, laughing on rooftops, sharing ice cream on rainy days, whispering dreams in the dark. And now I had to weigh all of that against one decision, one choice that could change the course of our lives. Could I trust him? Could I trust myself? I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. My best friend, my childhood confidant, was asking me for the impossible. And for the first time, I saw him not just as Alexander, my friend, but as a man I barely knew. A man who carried a darkness, a desire, a desperation that I hadn't seen before. I folded the paper slowly. The words "just a baby" burned into my mind. Was it really just that? Or was there something he wasn't saying? The next day I tried to act normal. We met for brunch in a quiet cafe downtown, pretending the night hadn't happened. Alexander smiled at me, a little too carefully, a little too rehearsed. I studied him across the table. He was always so composed, so untouchable. But there was a flicker in his eyes, a shadow. I asked casually about work, about travel, about his meetings. He answered politely, but kept circling the subject, like a predator pacing. Finally, he leaned back, looking at me with that intensity I couldn't escape. "I need to know what you're thinking," he said quietly, almost pleading. I looked down at my coffee, tracing the rim. I can't promise anything," I murmured. He nodded slowly, like he understood more than I did. And then he smiled, that small, dangerous smile, the one that made my stomach twist. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about him, about the contract, about what he asked. I wandered around my apartment, staring at the city lights, feeling smaller than ever. Memories of us as kids flooded me. The times he protected me, the secrets we shared, the laughter. Could I betray that trust? Could I become something I didn't recognize? I opened my laptop and stared blankly at the screen. Messages from friends, emails from work. None of it mattered. All I could hear was his voice. All I want is a baby. With you. And then it hit me. Maybe he wasn't asking for just a child. Maybe he was asking for me. But the question terrified me more than anything else. A week passed and he didn't push me. But his presence was everywhere. In my mind, in my heart, in the echoes of every memory. We met for casual lunches, for drinks, for walks. Everything felt normal and abnormal at the same time. He laughed, he teased. He was still Alexander, my friend. But there was always that underlying tension. I began noticing small gestures. The way he watched me over a menu, the way he brushed my hair out of my face, the quiet sighs when he thought I wasn't looking. And I realized something terrifying. I was starting to want him, not as a friend, not just as a companion, but as something I had never admitted to myself. And the thought both thrilled me and scared me. Finally, he invited me to his office late one night. The city lights glowed below us like a constellation we could never touch. He closed the door behind us. I felt the weight of anticipation pressing down on my chest. He sat, leaning back in his chair, hands steepled, eyes locked on me. "I can't promise anything, Emily," I said, my voice shaking. "I don't want promises," he replied softly. "I just want the truth. Do you even consider me capable of this?" I swallowed hard, fighting tears I didn't want to show. "Alexander, I don't know," I admitted. And for the first time, he smiled without restraint. Not the playful smile of a friend, but the dangerous, vulnerable, desperate smile of a man willing to risk everything. I left his office with my heart hammering. The city lights blurred as I walked down the street. My mind was a storm of thoughts I couldn't organize. I kept replaying his words, the way he looked at me, the vulnerability he tried to hide. Could a friendship survive something like this? Could I survive it? I passed the corner cafe we used to visit after late-night parties. I remembered laughing over spilled coffee, teasing each other about our dreams. Everything felt distant now. I was no longer the carefree girl who thought life was simple. Something had shifted. I could feel it in my bones. Alexander wasn't just asking for a baby. He was asking for a piece of my soul, and I didn't know if I was ready to give it. I ducked into a small bookstore to gather my thoughts. The scent of paper and ink calmed me slightly, grounding me. I ran my fingers over a row of novels, pretending to read. But all I could see was him, his eyes, his voice, his dangerous calm. And in that moment, I realized I was already thinking about him more than I should, more than I wanted to. I picked up a small journal and sat in the corner. I had to write, to make sense of the chaos inside me. I scribbled his words, my feelings, my fear, my confusion. The page filled with questions I didn't have answers to. And beneath it all, a tiny forbidden hope that maybe this could be more than a contract. The next morning, Alexander called. I hesitated before answering, heart pounding. "Emily," he said, voice low, controlled. "Have you made any decisions?" I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. I need more time," I whispered. There was silence on the line, a pause that carried weight. Finally, he said, "Take the time you need. But know this, I can't wait forever." Even over the phone, I could hear the tension behind his words. It wasn't just about the baby anymore. It was about him and the walls he'd built around himself. I hung up and sank into my chair. The apartment was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I remembered the nights he stayed by my side when life was cruel. The way he always understood, even when no one else could. Could I betray that trust by turning him down? Or was turning him down the only way to protect myself? I didn't have an answer. I only had the unease gnawing at me. It felt like standing on a cliff, the wind threatening to push me over. I ran my hands through my hair. Alexander wanted a baby, yes, but I realized he might be asking for something deeper. For me to finally acknowledge feelings we'd both been hiding, and that terrified me. Because what if I crossed the line and there was no going back? 2 days later, we met at his private gym. He was stretching, focused, muscles taut, but when he saw me, his posture relaxed slightly. "I thought about what you said," I began cautiously. He nodded, listening intently. "I need to be sure that I'm not just a placeholder, that you want me." He looked at me, intensity in his gaze, and I saw something I hadn't expected, a flicker of fear. Maybe he wasn't invincible after all. "You're not just a placeholder," he said quietly, almost to himself. I felt a shiver run down my spine. We trained in silence for a while, the sound of weights clinking and our breathing filling the space. But the silence was heavy with unspoken words. Finally, I stopped mid-stretch, facing him. "I want to understand you, Alexander. Not just the billionaire. Not just the man asking for a baby. You." He exhaled a slow, measured breath. "Then you're braver than I thought," he murmured, a small smile tugging at his lips. It was fleeting, but it changed something. I realized in that moment our friendship could never be the same again. It was evolving into something dangerous, something impossible to control, and yet I couldn't look away. That evening, he invited me to his penthouse again. I hesitated at the door, feeling the pull between fear and curiosity. The city lights glimmered below like distant stars. He poured 2 glasses of wine, his hands steady despite the tension in his eyes. "I need honesty, Emily," he said, voice low. "I need to know if this us is just a convenience or something real." I took a sip of wine, letting the warmth spread through me. "I don't know yet," I admitted. He leaned closer, his presence overwhelming. "You're not just giving me a child, you're giving me yourself," he said softly. The words hit harder than the contract ever could. I felt my defenses crumble. For the first time, I saw vulnerability in him, a truth he hadn't shared with anyone else. I wanted to reach out, to hold him, to tell him I felt the same, but fear held me back. Fear of losing myself, of being hurt, of giving too much. And yet my heart betrayed me with every beat. I realized I was already in too deep. I left his penthouse with a mix of dread and longing. The streets were quiet, wet from rain. I walked aimlessly, my mind replaying the evening. I could feel his eyes on me, even when he wasn't there. We were no longer just friends. I couldn't deny it. I was thinking of him in ways I never had before, ways that scared me. I wondered if he felt the same, or if this was just a temporary illusion, a fleeting moment that would leave me empty. I stopped by the bridge and looked at the river flowing beneath. The water reflected the city lights like molten silver. I thought about the future, about choices, about the contract. Could I give him a baby without losing myself? Could I let him in fully, knowing the risk? I closed my eyes and let the wind wash over me. The answer wasn't clear, but I knew one thing. Nothing would ever be the same again. Alexander called me late that night. His voice was low, almost hesitant. "Emily, I can't stop thinking about you," he admitted. My chest tightened, a mix of panic and desire. "I know," I whispered, barely breathing. "I can't either," he said. For a moment, the world outside disappeared. It was just us, 2 souls tangled in a dangerous web of friendship, desire, and unspoken truths. "I don't want to push you," he continued, "but I can't wait forever." The weight of his words pressed down on me. I wanted to scream, to say yes, to run, to hide, all at once. "I need time," I said finally. "Take all the time you need," he said softly. And then he hung up, leaving me in the quiet darkness. I collapsed onto my bed, heart racing, mind spinning. I was already in too deep, but I had no idea where this would lead. And a small, dangerous part of me hoped he would wait. The next morning, I woke to a message from him. It was short, simple, but enough to make my heart race. "Meet me tonight. We need to talk." I stared at the screen, frozen. The weight of the decision pressed on me. I knew tonight would change everything. I had no idea how. I could feel the pull of fate, the inevitability of it all. I dressed carefully, my hands trembling slightly. I wondered what he would say. Would he reveal more of his vulnerability? Would he confess feelings he had buried? Or would it be all business, all calculation, all contract? I had to know, and I had to face him, because running away was no longer an option. The bridge between friendship and something else was closing, and I had to cross it. The elevator doors closed behind me, leaving a quiet hum that seemed louder than usual. I gripped the strap of my bag, my heart pounding so fiercely I thought it might escape my chest. Tonight felt different. The city lights below shimmered like 1,000 secrets I wasn't ready to confront. I replayed the message in my head. We need to talk. Every fiber of me was alert, every nerve screaming both anticipation and fear. I reached his penthouse door and paused, hand trembling over the handle. Was I ready for the truth, for whatever he planned to reveal? I entered quietly. The apartment was dimly lit, soft amber light casting long shadows across the walls. Alexander was standing by the window, hands in pockets, looking out as if the city held his secrets. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. "You came," he said without turning. "I had to," I replied, voice small. He finally turned, eyes catching mine, searching, questioning, and I felt my stomach twist. "I need to be honest with you," he said, stepping closer. I nodded, unable to speak, the weight of his presence making it impossible. His hand hovered in the air for a moment before he rested it on mine. "You're not just giving me a baby, Emily," he murmured. "You're giving me something more. Something I didn't know I needed." I felt my chest tighten, my pulse quicken, and I realized this wasn't just about the contract anymore. It was about us. I sank into the leather sofa, feeling the weight of the evening press down on me. Alexander sat across from me, leaning forward, elbows on knees, his gaze unwavering. "I've been a fool," he admitted quietly. "I thought I could separate feelings from decisions, but I can't." The words hit harder than the contract ever could. I felt my breath catch in my throat. "What do you mean?" I asked cautiously, heart in my mouth. "I mean, I never wanted anyone else but you," he said, voice trembling slightly, a rarity for him. I was scared of admitting it, even to myself, but seeing you hesitate, it made me realize how much I need you. I wanted to reach out, to tell him the same, but fear clawed at my chest, fear that if I let myself go, there would be no turning back. "You're asking a lot," I whispered, "not just for me to have a child, but for me to give myself entirely." He nodded slowly, eyes softening, the mask of control slipping for just a second. "You've always given me more than I deserve," he admitted. I swallowed, feeling a mixture of dread and longing, and for the first time, I saw him as vulnerable, exposed, human. He rose suddenly, pacing near the window. "The truth is," he said, voice low and tense, "I've been haunted by my own mistakes, my family, my past. It made me believe I could only rely on myself." I listened silently, my heart aching at the raw honesty in his tone. "You've always been my anchor, Emily, my constant, and now I can't pretend I don't want more than a friendship with you." I swallowed hard, fighting tears I refused to show. The city lights reflected off his eyes, making them seem even more vulnerable. "I don't know if I can trust this," I whispered. "Trust me," he repeated, stepping closer. "Yes, Alexander. I don't want to be hurt. I don't want to give myself to a promise that might never hold," I admitted. He reached out, brushing my hair back gently. "I'm not asking for a promise anymore," he said. "I'm asking for a chance. Just one, to show you that we can be real." I felt a shiver run through me. Could I take that chance? Could I risk everything for someone who scared me more than anyone ever had? The air between us was electric, charged with fear, desire, and the weight of unspoken truths. I realized then that my life would never return to what it was before this night. The next few days were unbearable. Every message, every call, every glance from Alexander kept me off balance. I tried to distract myself with work, errands, meaningless tasks, but nothing could occupy my mind fully. He was there in every thought, every heartbeat, every hesitation. Finally, I agreed to meet him again, this time at a private rooftop garden he often used to escape the city. The night was quiet, the skyline ablaze with light, yet the air between us was thick with tension. He greeted me with a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Emily," he said softly, "I don't want to pressure you. I just need to be honest. I can't ignore what I feel anymore." I felt my stomach tighten, nerves buzzing. I don't know what I feel," I admitted. "You're allowed to not know," he said gently. "Adi, but I can't pretend that I'm not falling for you, and I don't want to pretend anymore." I looked at him, the man I had known my whole life, now entirely different, raw and exposed, Could I take the risk of falling too? Could I allow myself to want him, fully and without restraint? The wind brushed past us, carrying the scent of rain and city air. And in that moment, I realized the answer wasn't simple. It never would be. That night, Alexander held my hand as we walked along the edge of the garden. His grip was firm but gentle, grounding me while also igniting something dangerous in my chest. "I need to know you're not afraid," he said softly. "I'm terrified," I whispered. He smiled faintly, brushing his thumb across my knuckles. "Good," he said. "Fear means you're alive, means you care." The words should have comforted me, but instead they made me more aware of how much I was already invested. I couldn't stop thinking about him, about the contract, about what we were risking, and yet I didn't want to stop. His eyes met mine, dark and honest, and I felt a pull I couldn't resist. "Emily," he murmured, "I don't want just a night. I don't want just a child. I want us, everything we could be." My breath caught, and I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. I had been guarding my heart for so long, and now it was exposed, trembling under the weight of his confession. Could I really give myself to him? Could I trust him not to break me completely? The city lights blurred around us, but for a moment it was just him and me, and I realized that some risks were worth taking, no matter the cost. We sat on a bench overlooking the skyline, silence stretching between us. I finally turned to face him, eyes searching his. "I don't know if I can do this," I admitted, voice trembling. He nodded slowly, understanding, but not disappointed. "You don't have to do anything tonight," he said quietly. "But I want you to know, I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for honesty, for us to try, together." I felt my chest tighten with conflicting emotions. Fear, longing, excitement, doubt. "Alexander," I whispered. "Yes?" he prompted. I want to try," I said finally. His eyes widened slightly, relief and hope mingling in his expression. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "Then we start here," he said softly, "and we see where this leads." The city hummed below us, oblivious to the storm of emotions surrounding us. I felt a strange combination of fear and exhilaration. For the first time in years, I let myself hope. But even in that hope, I knew the world wouldn't make it easy. Secrets, past mistakes, and unexpected obstacles were waiting just around the corner. We stood together, hand in hand, overlooking the city as the wind tousled our hair. The contract sat forgotten in my bag. The rules, the expectations, the fear, all of it temporarily faded. It was just us, two people on the edge of something dangerous, something beautiful. Alexander turned to me, eyes soft, voice low. "I can't promise the world," he said, "but I can promise you me, all of me." I nodded, feeling my heart swell and ache at the same time. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I'll try. With you." And in that moment, I realized nothing would ever be the same again. The friendship that had defined our lives was gone, replaced by something deeper, riskier, and impossible to ignore. As the night wind swept around us, I felt a mixture of fear, excitement, and a strange, overwhelming hope. Tonight was the beginning of everything. The following week, everything felt charged. Every glance, every message, every brief touch carried new meaning. Alexander didn't pressure me, but his presence was constant. It was impossible to ignore him. Even at work, my mind wandered to him, to the warmth of his hand, the honesty in his eyes. We met for late-night dinners in quiet corners of the city, laughing softly, talking cautiously. I realized the bond between us was changing. No longer just friendship. No longer just a contract. Something fragile and complicated was forming. I wanted to surrender, but fear lingered. What if my heart led me somewhere I couldn't return from? And yet, the pull toward him was undeniable. One night, as we walked along the quiet streets after dinner, he reached out and took my hand, his fingers intertwined with mine, firm yet gentle, grounding me. Oh, I felt a rush of warmth and terror. This wasn't just affection. This was claiming, marking, a silent promise. I looked up at him, searching his eyes. They were steady, serious, yet full of an emotion I couldn't name. "I'm not asking for perfection," he said quietly. I just want us. I nodded, unable to speak, feeling my heart tighten with longing and fear. A few days later, Alexander invited me to his private library. The room smelled of leather and old books, a quiet refuge from the city outside. He gestured for me to sit. I need to tell you something important, he said, pacing slowly. I felt my stomach tighten. I've been contacted by someone from my past, he continued, voice low. Someone claiming they're carrying my child. My heart dropped. The world shifted in a heartbeat. I stared at him, eyes wide. You mean his ex? I whispered. Yes, he admitted, face hardening. She says she's pregnant. She's threatening to make everything public if I don't cooperate. I felt a wave of jealousy and fear crash through me. Was I just a temporary solution? Was everything we'd begun meaningless? Alexander reached for my hand, gripping it tightly. I want you to know the truth, he said urgently. You're the one I care about. I don't want her. I don't want anyone but you. I wanted to believe him, desperately, but the seed of doubt had already been planted. Could I trust him fully, even now? Even with this storm looming over us? The next night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about his ex, the threat she represented, the potential chaos. I walked through my apartment, restless, my mind replaying every word from Alexander. Was he telling the truth, or was I a consolation prize? I remembered his honesty, his vulnerability on the rooftop, his words about needing me, and I realized I didn't want to doubt him, but fear kept creeping back, gnawing at my confidence. I picked up my phone and typed a message, then deleted it. Finally, I called him. Alexander, I whispered when he answered. I can't stop thinking about her, about what she said. I know, he replied softly, and I hate that it's affecting you. I want you to know. You're the only one I want, Emily. Only you. I felt a tear slip down my cheek. I wanted to run to him, hold him, and never let go. And I wanted to believe him completely. I want to trust you, I whispered. Then do, he said firmly, and we'll face her together. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. For the first time in days, I felt a fragile sense of relief. But deep down, I knew the storm wasn't over. 2 nights later, Alexander and I met at a quiet rooftop garden again. The city glittered below, oblivious to the tension between us. I've contacted legal counsel, he said, voice low but firm. She won't have leverage over us. I nodded, feeling a mix of fear and pride. He turned to me, his hand brushing mine. Emily, I need you to understand something, he said. I don't want just your agreement. I want your heart, not for the child alone, for us. My pulse raced. I realized he was no longer speaking about the contract. He was speaking about something deeper, unspoken, dangerous. I don't know if I can give you that completely, I admitted. Then let me show you, he said gently. And in that quiet moment, I felt the shift. I could sense the truth in his words. He wasn't asking for a child anymore. He was asking for me, fully. And the thought was exhilarating and terrifying. I leaned into him slightly, testing the space between us. And for the first time, I felt like we were on the same side, facing the unknown together. The following day, I discovered something unexpected. I was late for work, rushing through my apartment when a letter slid under the door. I picked it up, heart pounding. Inside, a medical report. I read, frozen, as my mind processed the words. A rare genetic condition, one that only I carried. And that meant the child Alexander wanted would require me, not just as a mother, but as the only solution. My heart raced, fear twisting in my stomach. This was bigger than a contract, bigger than a baby, bigger than our feelings. It was life and legacy intertwined with survival. I sank to the floor, shaking. Could I handle this responsibility? Could I trust Alexander to stand with me fully through everything this meant? I knew the answer would define our future. I called him immediately. Alexander, we need to talk, I said, voice trembling. And I know, he replied calmly, and we'll face it together. But even as he spoke, I felt the gravity of what was coming. Nothing would be simple. Nothing would be safe. And yet, I was ready to try. That evening, Alexander came to my apartment. The tension in the air was thick, unspoken, but undeniable. I got your message, he said softly, and I'm here. Whatever this is, We face it together. I looked up at him, eyes wide, searching for reassurance. I don't know how to handle this, I admitted. You don't have to alone, he said, moving closer. I'll be with you every step of the way. I felt my chest tighten, relief mixing with fear. The weight of the secret, the threat of the ex, the stakes of the child, everything pressed down on me. But his presence was grounding, calming, and dangerous all at once. I realized then that whatever came next, we were bound together now. Not just by friendship or desire, but by something far more profound. And in that binding, there was both hope and terror. We sat together on my couch, hands intertwined, breathing in sync. I don't know what the future holds, he murmured. Nothing is guaranteed, but I promise you me, all of me. I nodded, letting his words sink in. For the first time, I felt both scared and safe. Our friendship had evolved into something unpredictable, something alive. And now, with the weight of the contract, the pregnancy, and the threats looming, we were forced to confront it all together. I rested my head against his shoulder, feeling the warmth and the tension of the moment. Whatever came next, we would face it side by side. And I realized this was just the beginning of a story that would change everything we thought we knew about love, trust, and destiny. The morning sun spilled through my curtains, but I didn't feel its warmth. I sat at my kitchen table, the medical report in front of me, trembling slightly. Alexander had stayed the night, but the weight of everything lingered in the air. I traced the edges of the paper, the words seared into my mind. This wasn't just about a baby anymore. It was about legacy, survival, and decisions that couldn't be undone. I felt a mix of fear, responsibility, and a strange surge of determination. He had promised to face it with me, but could we truly stand together against everything that was coming? The thought of Alexander facing his ex, the media, the potential scandal, made my chest tighten. And yet, I knew that running wasn't an option. I had already committed in ways deeper than words or contracts. I took a deep breath, letting the cool morning air fill my lungs. Whatever came next, I would meet it head on, because this wasn't just his life, it was ours. And I wasn't about to let fear dictate the terms. I sent him a simple message, let's face it together. And immediately I felt a spark of courage ignite within me. Alexander arrived an hour later, his presence filling the space. He didn't speak immediately, just handed me a folder. Legal documents, prepared responses, and evidence to counter the ex's claims. I glanced at him, admiration and worry swirling together. You've thought of everything, I murmured. I have to, he replied quietly. We can't let anyone manipulate this. Not her. Not anyone. The intensity in his eyes made my stomach twist. I realized then that his obsession with control was now tempered with a desire to protect what mattered most. And that included me. I studied his expression, vulnerable yet fierce, and I understood the depth of his feelings. This wasn't about power. It was about us. I trust you, I whispered. You have to, he said, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. The contact was fleeting but grounding. It a promise in a simple gesture. I felt my heart hammer, realizing that nothing could prepare me for what was coming. The stakes had never been higher. That afternoon, we met with a private investigator Alexander had hired. A sleek, professional office. Papers and photos spread across the desk. I watched as he briefed the investigator, explaining every detail, every threat. Alexander's focus was unwavering, but I could see the tension behind his calm exterior. He glanced at me, silently reassuring me that he wouldn't let this destroy us. I felt both pride and fear. We were partners now, bound not just by desire, but by necessity. The investigator presented evidence of the ex's manipulations, messages she had sent, false claims, and inconsistencies. Alexander's jaw tightened with controlled anger. This ends before it starts, he said, his voice low, firm. I nodded silently, feeling the weight of his words settle over us. I realized then that I was no longer a bystander. I was part of the fight, and somehow that scared me and thrilled me at the same time. Alexander reached for my hand under the table, his fingers tight around mine. Whatever comes next, we face it together, he whispered. And I believed him. That night, we returned to the rooftop garden. The city glittered below, unaware of the storm building above. I felt Alexander's hand in mine, warm, grounding, a lifeline. "We can't let her control our lives," he said softly, voice low. "I know," I replied, heart pounding. He turned to face me, eyes searching mine. "I don't just want the baby, Emily," he murmured. "I want you. All of you. No games, no contracts, no fear. Just us." I felt my chest tighten, emotions overwhelming. Could I trust him completely? Could I give him my heart without reservation? The wind tugged at my hair, carrying the scent of rain in the city below. I want that too," I admitted, voice trembling. His face softened, relief and hope mingling in his expression. And in that moment, I realized we were no longer defined by fear or by the past. We were defining our own future together, and that truth was both terrifying and exhilarating. The following days were tense yet intimate. We navigated meetings, calls, and preparations while finding stolen moments of closeness. Alexander would brush my hair from my face during paperwork. I would catch his gaze and feel a jolt of desire. We were partners in the fight, and in the moments between danger, we were partners in something far more profound. One evening, he kissed my forehead as we reviewed documents together. It was tender, grounding, and full of promise. "I'm falling for you," he admitted quietly. I felt my heart leap and ache simultaneously. "I've already fallen," I whispered, resting my hand over his. The bond between us was solidifying, deeper than either of us had anticipated. And even as shadows of threats loomed, we discovered that love, even complicated and dangerous, could be our strongest ally. Suddenly, the ex resurfaced in a public way. A social media post hinted at her claims, threatening scandal. I felt my stomach drop. Alexander's jaw tightened, but I could see determination in his eyes. He pulled me close. "We expected this," he said firmly. "I won't let her destroy what we're building." I nodded, holding on to him, feeling both fear and reassurance. The stakes were escalating, but for the first time, I didn't feel alone. We were a unit, a team, bound by choice, desire, and now necessity. And I knew that whatever schemes she planned, we would face them together, side by side, because there was no going back. That night, Alexander held me in his arms on the rooftop overlooking the city. The stars twinkled above, indifferent to our struggles. "I can't promise perfection," he murmured, "but I can promise you me, every part of me." I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. For the first time, fear and desire coexisted in a strange harmony. We had survived doubts, threats, and the weight of impossible decisions. And in that survival, something beautiful was growing. A bond, fierce and unshakable, forged through vulnerability and trust. I realized then that love wasn't just a feeling. It was courage. It was commitment. And it was exactly what we had chosen to give each other, no matter what came next. The next morning, I woke to a flurry of messages. The ex had gone public with her claims, social media buzzing with speculation. I froze, staring at my phone, heart pounding. Alexander appeared beside me, calm but fierce. "Don't look," he said firmly. "I'll handle this." I wanted to protest, to insist on being involved, but something in his eyes made me pause. He was determined, protective, and unyielding. "You trust me, right?" he asked softly. I swallowed hard. "I do," I whispered, the words both fragile and resolute. He pulled me close, brushing my hair back. "We fight this together," he promised. And in that promise, I felt a surge of courage. The storm was coming, but I knew we weren't facing it alone. We were partners in every sense of the word. And for the first time, I believed that love could be stronger than fear. Alexander called a meeting with his legal team. I watched as he orchestrated strategy with precision, every detail accounted for. He was calm, collected, yet I could see the underlying fire in his eyes. He glanced at me occasionally, reassurance in each look. "This isn't just about winning," he explained later, pulling me aside. "It's about protecting what matters. Us, our future." I nodded, absorbing the weight of his words. He reached for my hand, fingers entwined with mine. "I've never wanted anything more than to protect you," he whispered. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I realized he wasn't just fighting for control. He was fighting for us, and in that fight, we became more than allies. We became something unbreakable. I let his hand squeeze mine, grounding me. We would face the X, the world. Not in every obstacle together. No retreat, no compromise, only us against everything. Later that evening, Alexander and I returned to the rooftop garden. The city shimmered below like a sea of lights, unaware of the turmoil above. I leaned against him, drawing comfort from his presence. "I don't care what she says," he murmured, voice low. "I want you. Only you." I felt my chest tighten, emotions clashing inside me. Could I trust him completely? I had seen his vulnerability, his honesty, his determination, and yet fear lingered. I trust you," I whispered, trembling. He smiled softly, brushing my hair from my face. "Then we move forward," he said firmly, "and nothing will come between us." I felt a sense of determination settle over me. No matter what schemes the ex had, no matter the threat, we would survive. Together. And in that unity, I found unexpected strength. Strength to face whatever lay ahead. And love, raw and untamed, began to bloom fully between us. Days passed, and the ex escalated her threats. Media outlets speculated, rumors spread, but Alexander remained unwavering. He shielded me from the worst of it, but he never hid the truth. We reviewed statements together, strategized every move. I realized how deeply he cared, not just for the child, not just for the contract, but for me. And I felt my own feelings solidifying, fear and desire intertwined in a dangerous dance. One night he took my hand in his, fingers pressing firmly. "I can't let anyone take you from me," he whispered. "I won't let her ruin what we're building." I felt my pulse quicken. "I'm not afraid," I said softly. "Not with you." And in that declaration, I sensed the shift. We were no longer merely surviving. We were claiming our future, together, and nothing else mattered. The confrontation finally came. Alexander faced his ex directly, calm and resolute. Her accusations, threats, and manipulations fell flat against his unwavering stance. I watched from the side, heart racing, adrenaline coursing through me. Every word he spoke was measured, precise, protective. She tried to provoke doubt, but he shut it down with cold clarity. And then finally he turned to me. "You see? Nothing can touch us. Nothing can come between us." I felt a wave of relief and pride. This wasn't just a victory in the fight. It was proof of what we could endure together. I realized then that love wasn't fragile. It was strength. And Alexander and I had found it in each other, forged in vulnerability and trust. Weeks later, I discovered I was pregnant. The news brought shock, joy, and fear in equal measure. Alexander was the first to know. His reaction was a mixture of awe, love, and protection. "I've never wanted anything more," he whispered, holding me close. I rested my head on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I trust you," I murmured, tears streaming down my face. "We're in this together," he said firmly. And in that embrace, I felt the culmination of everything we had endured. The fear, the tension, the threats, all had led to this moment. Our love, tested and strengthened, had emerged victorious. And I knew the journey wasn't over. Challenges remained, but together we could face them all. Months later, on a quiet evening, we stood together overlooking the city. Our child's future stretched ahead, filled with possibilities and hope. I rested my head on Alexander's shoulder, hands intertwined. "I never imagined it would be like this," I whispered. "Neither did I," he admitted softly, "but I wouldn't change a thing." The city lights sparkled below, reflecting the journey we had endured. Love, trust, and resilience had carried us through storms, threats, and impossible choices. And now as we faced the horizon together, I knew one thing. We had everything we needed, each other, and a love that could survive anything. Thank you for joining this journey in the Storyverse Vault, my beautiful, amazing family. If you love this story, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment below. Share and stay connected. Outer because the next story will be even more thrilling, emotional, and dramatic. You won't want to miss it.